Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're live. I don't know why the sound wasn't working because all of my volume is on my computers and on YouTube. And if you can hear me now and I can hear you,
We
I'm
can
not.
hear you now, and the chat is saying they couldn't hear as well.
Yeah, I see it now. I see it on the chat. So I apologize to the chat. I'm sorry it didn't work. I'll have to figure out what I clearly it's user error because I can hear it on my
You
end.
had the
I can
same
hear it.
problem when you tried to do your year in review as well.
Right. And I don't know what I did to fix that because oh, you know what? I do know. I do know. Wait a minute. I do remember what the problem was. So I apologize, you guys. Hold on. I do remember now. I do remember now. Let me stop the screen share. That's what it is. There's a little box that says share audio that I forgot to hit. So that is what I had to do. And I apologize to the chats. Thank you for those that are here. Let's go back. All right. Here we go.
D-Day was the day, I tell you.
You can hear it now?
This was the day when every school
Okay.
in Birmingham knew that it was going to happen. But you got to remember that all of the planning was a secret. Good. Go over there, roll. Good morning, children. Up in the morning and out to school. The teacher is teaching the golden rule. I remember that morning I woke up with my mind on freedom. Oh, I took special pain with putting a little starch in my blouse, had my toothbrush, and I got the toothpaste, the soap, because I had a feeling that I wouldn't be coming home. Ring, ring goes the bell. This doctor pushed D-Day early in the morning, but they wouldn't even use D-Day. They use all that jive talk. Don't forget, kids, there's gonna be a party with all you. Don't forget your toothbrushes, because brushes will be served. Back in the classroom, open your book. Now, everybody who's listening know what the deal is. D-Day was the day. My mother said, okay, when don't go to that march. I mean, don't go. You go to school. I told my mother, I said, I hear you. We were raised not to lie. So I didn't tell her lies that I wasn't going. I said, I hear you. We would have people picked out. Your job is to turn this fire alarm, turn that fire alarm, get the football team, basketball team, get the cheerleaders, get the band. It was right at 11 o'clock when they arrived. They came up to the fence with a sign that just said, it's time. Well, we said, let's go for the window. And I told her, I said, come on, let's go. And I looked around and, all I could see was my own family almost, I looked back up at those kids, but you said you were going to go. You promised. And that's when kids started coming. Coming out the windows, coming out the doors. It's so beautiful. You would believe it. Mrs. Golden turned her back as we got up. And we took it from there. I wanted to walk out with them, but it was my job. There was nothing you could do once the students started moving. The principal, the teachers, and everybody had to step aside. My boyfriend tried to stop me from going. And I walked around the building, and I came right back at him when I came. You have about two children left in the class, lady. Everybody's gone. I'm sure that morning Beverly was nervous about who was going to show up. At first there were a few, then there were hundreds, then there were thousands. We heard that kids were coming in from all over the city. And when we heard that they were coming in from out of town, we got more excited. I had a cool card. They said, okay, we need you to go out to Fairfield. There's some students outside the classroom that won't go back in. Lo and behold, when I got out in Fairfield, the whole campus was outside of the building. They all said, we going to Birmingham. 20 kids climbed on the car and 800 followed behind it. I love the way you walk. I love the way you walk. The more we walked, the more we gathered. And every once in a while, you look back and you saw it was more kids coming from somewhere, from another direction. You said, where are all these kids coming from? You had never seen that many people in your life. It's like a football game.
Kids walked as far as 18 miles to get to Birmingham in order to be arrested. And the purpose was to go to jail. The gathering place was 16th Street Baptist Church.
Oh, we poured into 16th Street like a waterfall.
They were coming in all doors, from all directions, from the basement, from the back.
It was just like one big death rally. Either Smart, are you in the house? Or Western, are you in the house?
All right, so hello everyone. Thank you for joining us. I wanted to play that little bit of a clip for you guys to because that's what we're going to be discussing today. We're going to be talking about Dr. King and his legacy, but we're going to connect it to the kids and to education because that is what this channel is all about. So first off, I'm going to let Dr. Elton Teddy, I know that I just made up a whole new name for you. Just made up a whole new name for you.
Okay.
Go ahead and you go ahead and say hello to the folks. Introduce yourself. Say whatever you want to say.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, and good night from wherever you are. Definitely excited about today's topic. Definitely want to educate and edify each and every one of you, allow you all to educate us as well. And we'll learn from each other.
Absolutely. So, I mean, the reality of the situation is we know why we're home today. Well, most of us. I know some people, unfortunately, did still have to work today, but we know why we're home today. It is in celebration and remembrance of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and it goes without saying who he is and all that that he worked for. Today is supposed to be a day of service. I have already been out of my bed at 6:30 this morning and took care of some community activities, and I came right back home. So, but I also wanted to come on here today because I feel like it's important that we acknowledge the day, but I also wanted to maybe share with you guys a different part or a story that maybe you're not as familiar with. A lot of you all are familiar with the pictures from the Children's March or the Children's Crusade, but you may not be as familiar with the story behind it and Martin Luther King's connection to that story. So, as always, feel free to drop any questions or comments or criticisms in the chat. We look forward to hearing everything. If you have a question or a show recommendation, you can always email that to us. I'm going to have that running at the bottom of the screen so you guys can get that information. And Dr. El Teddy, do you want to maybe share a little bit in reference to what we know of Martin Luther King and his education situation?
Martin Luther King is very well documented. As most of us know, he graduated high school at 15, immediately went on to Morehouse College, where he got his undergrad, what was it, 19, I believe it was? I think it was 19.
Yeah, I believe it was.
Graduate degree. And he did well in his in high school as well as in undergrad. Now, the interesting thing about Martin Luther King was when he did go on to get his doctoral degree, he was a very average student, and he even talked about how difficult it was. He struggled. He was a C student when he was getting his doctoral degree, and he talked about that. Now, there was a lot that went into it because he was enthralled in the civil rights movement as well and so forth. So that played a part, but he talked about the difficulty that he had getting that terminal degree. And that's something that I'm a member of. Well, there are a couple organizations, but I'm a member of one of the organizations for Black people who have a terminal degree, be it a PhD, DD, JD, you name it, PsyD, all the way down the line. And that when we have conferences each year, and one of the things that they talk about is why there aren't as many people getting it as we'd like to, while the numbers for bachelor's degrees and even master's degrees have skyrocketed, the numbers for those terminal degrees are still lagging behind. But Martin King, he was a scholar, a theologian. He was, a student at heart. But even I wanted to note that I didn't want, sometimes people always want to paint the rose-colored glasses picture of someone in their demise or posthumously. But Martin King, he even talked about his struggle as a student getting his degree, his terminal degree.
Right. So I just wanted to bring that up because, again, I don't want to assume anything. I know we have gotten there are certain Black historical figures that we have gotten drilled into us from the age of kindergarten. I said the age of kindergarten, from kindergarten all the way through. But I also want to make sure that we're getting, we're going beyond, like El Teddy said, the rose-colored version of what we were told. And it's not to disparage anybody, but I think I think it helps that average student to know that, hey, they weren't, these people were not all, straight A. Because, you hear, oh, he graduated at 15. He went to undergrad. You hear that, but to understand that it was a struggle involved. Like, it wasn't a perfect situation and it was a struggle. So that's, again, it's nothing that we say is to disparage what King was and what he was able to do, but it is to give some information and to just share just the facts. So I don't know who's still in the room, but I do want to shout out our folks that came through. We had YBS Mary, Shakira, and Tanari. Are in the house, Nicole Stevens. If anybody else is in there, you drop a comment, let us know you're here. We're going to keep rolling though. So from the point of view of how did Martin Luther King become connected to the children's crusade, or how did that all work out? We have to fast forward our clock to 1963. And at this point, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference really had not had a lot of victories. They had the big victory with the Montgomery bus boycott, and they had really been floundering ever since. They had some small victories, but they had not been able to make that large impact that they had done in Montgomery. And because of that, history will have you believe that every Black person was marching with King, and that is just not the reality. It was a small percentage, just like we see now. We're going to get to Black Lives Matter and towards the end, but just like you see now, it was a small percentage of active people. And so they decided, or they were told, that Birmingham should be the next spot. They knew that it was a large they knew it was a hard battle. They knew it was an uphill battle, but they also felt like if they could get Birmingham, it would pretty much catapult. So the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and jump in anytime, El Teddy, if I'm leaving something out or I'm misspeaking, mobilized to Birmingham. And it was not very successful. It was not doing too well. And we know that Martin Luther King had been arrested, which led to the very famous letter from the Birmingham jail. Birmingham was not trying to let him out of jail, even to the point where Coretta Scott King actually called the president for assistance on getting her husband out of jail, because nobody was paying attention. It was just he was there, and it is what it is. Anything you want to jump in, El Teddy, before
one thing that I also wanted to talk about too is a lot of times, and let me preface by saying I'm not trying to disparage anything or any organization or anything, but a lot of times when the SCLC got into the fight, there were already people on the ground that had already been fighting the fight. One of those organizations was SNCC. You don't hear a lot about SNCC when you do hear it here and there, but what they were doing with SNCC was the ones that were doing the grassroots. They were the ones that were wearing the stripes of the civil rights movement. They were the ones getting beat. They were the ones that were going in and finding out what's wrong in this city and doing all of the groundwork and finding it out. And a lot of times, because of the high profile nature of Martin Luther King at the time, Reverend Abernathy and all of them, they knew that came with a lot of extra stuff that may have not allowed them to really delve in there and get a lot done that they needed to get done. So organizations like SNCC and other organizations would do a lot of the grassroots efforts. They would get the people in that town to come and buy into it. They were the ones who actually taught the nonviolent tactics because they lived through it. They were trained with it. They were the ones who taught people, and in this case, children, how to go about doing this, because it wasn't as easy as just, we just gonna go march. It was very organized. They were trained, they were designed, they were prepared, so forth and so on. So I did want to say that part, like you said, Martin Luther King was in jail. Mm-hmm. And while Martin Luther King was in jail, there was still other SCLC and other organizations that were moving the chains and doing things behind the scenes, trying to, move the needle and trying to do what they could, because no movement is one person. So I did want to make that known.
And let me add to that as well. You, what you said is very, very valid. That SNCC very much were the workers of the movement, and they were a lot of times the unsung heroes because they would organize and put things in order, and then the SCLC would come in, sort of swoop in and take, for lack of a better word, take the credit. If you remember, to give you guys an example of what I'm talking about, if you remember in the movie Selma, there was a scene where you had John Lewis and SNCC having a meeting with Martin Luther King and the SCLC leadership. And that was the argument that, you abandoned us in this area, but now you want us to help you in this area. And there was a whole conflict. And you saw that ultimately SNCC said, we're not, this isn't what we're going to do. And John Lewis went and joined with SNCC. So that was that. So if you saw the movie Selma, you saw that conflict play out within the movie, and you're right. It very much was an issue. So Martin Luther King eventually gets out of jail, and when he gets out of jail, like El Teddy just said, the movement had continued, and they had already come up with the idea to include the children, because at that point, the adults were no longer participating. They were worried about losing their jobs. They were worried about the threats to their family, and they didn't see any progress. Remember, Bull Connor was, give me the word. I'm trying not to cuss, but give me the word. Bull Connor was such a bull, we know, very racist, and he was the head of the Public Works Commission, some made up title, but basically he ran the city. And even the mayor bowed down to Bull Connor. And so with that being said, there was no the city, there was no, what's the word I'm looking for? There was a lot of fear and no progress. And at that point, go ahead.
One of the things that the youth at that time introduced to the movement, one of the things that they, and Martin King did it when he was in his early 20s, but he first started, when they first did the Montgomery boycott for the bus, he used it, but he stopped using it as much because he had started to get older himself. And what happened was when SNCC came in, they started to do things. SNCC understood it was still early 1960s. Majority of Black people in early 1960s did not have a television still. Much of America still did not have television. But he knew those people with influence and power and money did have televisions. And he knew that the going public, if you kill a Black man, you see today, they're unmoved, they're unfazed. But let something happen to a child, then they know, okay, that will move the needle. That will get the feelings and emotions of the general public involved, and that will move the needle. So what they said was the children had wanted to be a part of it the entire time. And when I think it was Reverend Bevel who said we need to get them involved because we're not making a dent in this. But if the public, if America can see that Black people are not just the adults that you think about that you don't care about, but are young Black boys and Black girls that are also having to face these atrocities, while it will hurt in the long run, it will gain. We might take a couple steps back because of these atrocities happening to our kids, but it's definitely going to push the movement forward faster than what it's been going. And that's what they did. So when you see, and it's so funny, so many people get it twisted. They look at those images from the very documented images from the civil rights movement of all of those atrocities, be it Selma or be it in Birmingham, neglecting the fact that these were children, these were teenagers and young people as small as 4 and 5 years old that were out there, and these atrocities were happening to them. These weren't by and large the old people and the adults, like Really People said. They came in and swooped in the aftermath after a lot of those atrocities that happened, and without the young people, the movement wouldn't have been what it was.
Right. And that's valid. The visual of and some of the most famous pictures from the civil rights movement are pictures, like he said, the two I mean, we know the Montgomery bus boycott, but as far as the violence, we know Bloody Sunday will forever, be in our minds, seeing those but that is you kind of have to see the video of that. But as far as still pictures, the pictures from the Children's March are so powerful, seeing dogs attacking children, seeing water hoses pushing kids, physically pushing kids down the street, seeing paddy wagons full of kids, looking through the bars. And so those pictures, like you said, it wasn't even just throughout the United States. Those pictures went worldwide. And people in, other countries were like, what in the hell is going on over there? And it really embarrassed the United States. And that was really a major turning point in the civil rights movement that children did. And in that video clip I showed you, it really just kind of talked about, they called it D-Day. And it was supposed to just be a one-day protest, like the Montgomery bus boycott. And it was a D-Day. And they knew that, you saw that the DJ was sending messages to the kids saying, look, take your toothbrushes, meet us at the park. We're going to be serving lunch. That was all of that was code for where they were going to meet and, be ready to go to jail. And it was so effective and so powerful. Obviously they kept going until they were able to get what they wanted out of it. And again,
story with that, we do know that it was powerful enough to get them to enact certain laws within the city for the civil rights movement, but they did not let it go. They expelled all those kids from school.
Oh yeah. Oh no,
and
it was
then,
yeah.
And then even beyond that, even once that got overturned, they even decades later to refuse to remove those arrest records from a lot of those kids' records. They refused to remove it, and it had lasting effects on those kids in terms of them having an arrest record because of that. And it took years for that stuff to get removed from their records and things like that. And so these are, we think about the immediacy of it, but we're talking about residual effects that reverberated in these people's lives, for a very long time beyond the civil rights movement.
Absolutely. I was in a program a few years ago at Duke University, and it was a month-long program where every day they were bringing in different, our days were jam-packed, and I met so many people whose names I had read of in books who were a part of SNCC, and they told their story. And a lot of them, you are absolutely correct, I mean, not saying you weren't, but a lot of them told the story about how they do still have a lot of these arrests on their records, or a couple of the schools where, like, for example, a lot of these people dropped out of college, and a lot of the schools where they dropped out of gave them degrees, gave them their honorary degree, because it was like, hey, you know, as an honor. But they were saying how some of the schools still, and you would be surprised that Howard is one of them. Howard University is one of the schools that, I'm not saying they have to do it, but a lot of the other schools said, look, we know you dropped out to do, and you did these great things as part of the movement. And so they posthumously gave them their degrees. But Howard is one of the schools that a lot of, and I'm not saying none of them, but a lot of them were saying their arrest record, their school, like you said, being expelled from college or being expelled, because there was one woman that we met with, and she had gone to Spelman, and she got expelled from Spelman because she was participating in the movement. So, you hear the stories, and that, like you said, this didn't happen in a bubble. These were long-term effects that affected that generation of kids, young adults at that time period. And yes, you are absolutely correct in saying that they, when they were arrested, they were interrogated as if they were adults. They were kids as young as 7 years old that they arrested. They were interrogated. And that's that video that I showed a clip of, I'll put the link in the description. I show that whole DVD to my students. The whole DVD is like maybe 45 minutes long. And they talk about being questioned by the police. And they talk about how the police would just release them in the middle of the night and not contact their parents and not let anybody know they were coming home. And they would just be let out in the middle of the night and would have to make their way home. They would keep the jails were full, so they had to take them to the state grounds, and they had them in horse corrals that were full with hay that they would keep. And if it rained, they just got rained on. And so it was not, we see the pictures of them dancing on, with the water hoses, but it ran deep. It really, really ran deep.
It's interesting, Nicole Stevens, that you said what you said about your great grandmother and your mom and her siblings. My question when we brought up this topic was, today, if we have another movement, and we need to have several movements, but if there's another movement, are you willing to put your child in that situation? We think about the children, but think about the decision that the parents had to have. Those children didn't just run away from home and do that. They had to have the okay of those parents. So when I think about a couple things. I think about what had to be said to these parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and, family members, because we know it takes a whole village. You know what I'm saying? What had to be said to them in order to get them to say, okay, I'm going to let my son, my daughter, my grandson, granddaughter, niece, nephew, relative, friend, whatever, godson, goddaughter, go and participate this, knowing they're probably going to get arrested.
And that's valid, because then again, in the video you saw where some kids had permission, other kids did it without their parents' permission. And you saw that one clip where her mother told her, don't go down there. And she sort of said, okay, but she never said she wasn't going to go. And later on in the DVD, she talks about when she came home and, how she said her mama, she said she smelled so bad. Her mama washed her in the yard and was like, before you come up in my house, we're going to, But they had that conversation, none of the people in that, and I'm sure we can find many, many stories, but none of the people in that particular DVD said that they regretted what they did, but they definitely talked about that it wasn't all fun and games. And you could, as they were telling their story, you could definitely see in their eyes the effect. And like you said, that's a question I often ask my students when we talk about the civil rights movement. I say to my students, would you be willing to sacrifice in these ways when we talk about the Montgomery bus boycott and having to walk everywhere and, all of that, all of the dedication that took. And we have that conversation. And the reality is, in this world, is there anything that is important enough to us to put that for that sacrifice? You know what I'm saying? And that's a deep question to ask yourself as well as try to find out from others. You know what I mean?
I think my generation, and we're about in the same generation, even though
I'm about to say don't try it. We in the same generation. Don't
oh,
try
okay,
it.
I was about to say because you is kind of 65. You might have been in the civil rights era, but we are about both of us
My students
graduated.
asked me,
Both of
where
us
was I
graduated
assassinated?
in the 90s. Okay, both of us graduated in the 90s, and so our generation of young people and students, we didn't have that. And
Right.
I think about it, we had our parents' generation, they had theirs. I would argue you got this generation right now. They definitely have their things that they go out there and they galvanize behind and they fight for. You got all of the movements that we'll talk about in a few minutes that's going on today with the young people. But I think about my own generation, and a lot of us in the chat are in that same generation. We might have graduated sometime between the very, very late 80s through the 90s. Maybe if you want to go all the way to about 2002 or 3, if you graduated sometime within that 15 year, let's say we go from 88 to 03, which is a 15-year span. Okay. Mm-hmm. If you take that 15-year wall of people that graduated in that time frame, let's think about this. We didn't have that. You know what I'm saying? We grew up during a time where Blacks were becoming more middle class. Many that were impoverished were coming out of poverty. We were disillusioned during the Clinton years to think that, things weren't as bad. And I think that, and I hate to be self-deprecating, but I would venture to tell you my generation, and I live in this generation and I'm a part of this generation, maybe a part of the disillusionment. I think our parents also wanted to cook. And I think it goes to what you were saying earlier about those young people that went through what they went through during the civil rights era, and they knew how horrible it was, and they knew the lasting effect. They said, I don't want that for my son or daughter. I don't want that for my grandson or granddaughter. So I'm not going to let them go through that. And so I'm going to make life where they do not have to experience that or go through that at all. So our generation, we came up thinking, oh, I ain't going to have to go through that. Not knowing that if we do not continue to move the needle and we stay stagnant and we become complacent, there will come a time where the curve will pass you and you will have to duplicate what you did in the past. So I look at I'm saying that to say this. I don't know, and I'm old now, but I don't know.
Yes, you are.
You know what? But I don't know that I think that my generation missed out on that. And I'm not saying that my generation didn't add to our race, to our movement, because we certainly did. We have done a whole lot as a generation. But that is part of the movement that we certainly did not, I would say that's a part that's missing from the story that's told of my generation.
Yeah, and that was something. If you've been watching my other channel, Really Be TV, for a while, then or listening to the podcast, because when the whole Colin Kaepernick situation happened with the NFL, we had a few discussions on the podcast in reference to this boycott. And here's the thing that I said at the time. I never had an issue. I never questioned the fact, because it started with Colin Kaepernick and some other teammates, because he gets, but he gets the brunt of it. But he wasn't by himself in the protest. But they were protesting police brutality. That's where it started. From there, it evolved into a protest against the NFL for what they were trying to do to silence him and collusion and all those things. Now, I'm not going to get into the minutia of that whole situation. But what I'm saying is when it got down to boycott time, right? My question, and here's the thing, it wasn't because I love football so much that I couldn't give it up. My question was, what is it that we're asking of the NFL? What are the demands? What is this looking like? Because when you go back to the civil rights movement, there was a like you said, it wasn't as spontaneous as people seem to think these things were. So there was a plan. There was a wanted outcome. And so I say, I have no problem saying I'm not going to look at the NFL and I'm going to boycott the NFL. My question was always, what is the end? What is it that we want? What are we working for? And we live in such a microwave society that people yell boycott on Monday, and then on Friday they looking for Super Bowl tickets. So I need. Are we, like, you going back to your first question about the commitment, and are we in a place where we can make those types of commitments for what we believe in? It may not be as on that large scale as obvious of an outcome, but you know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying, but I think about it from another angle as well. If you think about those kids during the civil rights era, it goes from vision to mission statement. They knew the vision, they didn't necessarily know the mission statement. And they were in it to win it enough in the vision that they didn't need to know what the vision statement is. And I think that's one of the differences in our generation, never having had to go through that or participate in a boycott of that nature or that length. We are of the, I need to know the vision and the mission statement before I can buy into it. Whereas in past, and when you have had big boycotts, most people know the vision. They don't know the mission statement, may not ever know the mission statement, but they are fighting for that vision. And I think that is one of the issues that is a problem. And when I look at a lot of the arguments that are had for the boycott and for why we should and should not do things, I look at people my age, and then it dawns on me again, oh yeah, we are the ones who never had to. And I'm including myself in that.
I include myself as well.
We are the ones who never had to participate in those kinds of things. We didn't have boycotts. We didn't have to, we were sheltered from that.
Right. And now in high school, my father had a nickname for me. He called me the militant midget, because I was good for a protest in high school. Them nuns hated to see me coming because I was good for a protest. I was good because, I was going through my whole, I discovered in high school, I discovered Malcolm X and the Black Panthers and, Marcus Garvey and Stokely Carmichael. Like, I discovered those people, Deacons for Defense. I discovered those people in high school. And in my mind, I was a fight the power. That was me. Public Enemy, those was my folks, right? And so I feel like I went through a phase of guilt. This is going to follow me now. I went through a phase of guilt exactly connected to what you just said. I felt like, look at what everybody did for us. Look at the sacrifice. And I felt like I was reaping the benefits of all of that, but I hadn't put in any work. And so and don't get me wrong, some of the stuff I was protesting needed to be addressed, but I felt like I went through a phase of, I'm going to find some stuff to be mad about. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to find something to protest. And my father started calling me the militant midget because he was like, why you always got to find what's wrong? Why do you always have to write a letter or ask for the manager? Or in high school, I mobilized we were going to do a walkout when Rodney King verdict came down. We were going to do a walkout. I said, because the nuns, I went to a Catholic school. They have not acknowledged what our people are going through with the Rodney King verdict. We didn't get any justice. Now, in hindsight, were they supposed to? But in my mind, I'm in Maryland. That was in LA. And I felt like they were obligated to address us. And I had mobilized this whole walkout. We were walking out at 2:00, honey. We were wearing black armbands, honey. I was passing out black armbands. And in my mind, because that's what, and like you said, it goes back to that. We didn't have to, so much we reaped the benefit of so much of what was paved for us. Now, that brings me kind of to where we are today. There are movements today, going, and that's where you wanted to kind of touch on, and I'll piggyback on that.
Definitely. We have the generation after ours, the millennials, who galvanized. It started with you know, some people will pinpoint the Trayvon Martin situation as, you know, the seminal, one of those seminal events and seminal moments that galvanized this. You had the Eric Garners, you had the Ferguson situation, and so forth. And so when the Black Lives Matter movement happened, while it was started by people from our generation, the movers and shakers in the Black Lives Matter movement was the generation afterward. It was the young folks. It was the young folks that was in the streets throwing bottles, burning stuff down, and said, "Oh, you gonna see us, you gonna hear us, and you not gonna take us for granted." I'm gonna save that for later when we get to the end parts. But I had a thought. But and I think that they are much more ready, prepared, and inspired to say, no, we're going to go out here and we're going to do this. And damn it all to hell, whatever the consequences are, we're willing to take those. But something has to be changed. Something has to be done. And I think it's laudable that these young people nowadays have said that. No. And I think that we need to put more backing behind them, because even when the Black Lives Matter movement happened, I heard a lot of people in our generation say, well, why are they doing that? Well, that, you know, I heard a lot of people say, well, they need to, they'll need to be doing it. Well, they need, and instead of saying no, yes, somebody, we do to, you know, get eyes on us again, because let's be clear, as Black people, in terms of getting rights and equalities and moving the needle and causing the American populace to give us what we need, we're now lagging behind other. Whereas we were in the forefront of the minorities that were getting rights given to them, we are lagging behind now.
We absolutely are.
Will be the Hispanics have taken that mantle. They have said, y'all ain't know what to do. Y'all act like y'all playing around. All right, we got this. We'll take this. We okay with
That's
it.
true. That is so true.
Okay.
That is so true. Yeah, I feel the same way when we look at the mantle, not the mantle, but the baton being passed. And I agree with you, because again, you can go back to old episodes of the podcast where we got into that whole Black Lives Matter and, you know, doing too much. I remember somebody arguing or complaining about here in DC, they shut down some major roads during rush hour, and people saying, I mean, you can do your protest, but why you have to stop traffic? That's the protest. Like, that was the protest, because nobody pays attention when you're on the sidewalk. They pay attention when you're in the middle of the street, stopping them from getting to work in the morning. And I get it that it's inconvenient, but it's supposed to be. And that's the point I was making, was like, it's supposed to be inconvenient.
That was my whole part. That was my whole anger behind the Colin Kaepernick thing, because they were saying, okay, you can protest, but I don't want your protest to make me uncomfortable. Then it's not a protest, because you're going to ignore the issue. Like you're saying, I remember that when Black Lives Matter hit Miami, I told you a couple of weeks ago, we talked about Art Basel that they have in Miami. That's this huge arts festival. People come from all over the globe to Miami. They descend upon Miami in December for this huge Art Basel festival.
Yeah, I stumbled into it. I was there and didn't even know what was going on.
And this was maybe in 2000, I want to say 15 or 16. I-95, these people said, oh, we standing in the middle of I-95 downtown Miami. You ain't going nowhere. And if you know anything about downtown Miami, the way it's set, I-95 is set up, once you get on, you cannot get off until basically you're out of downtown.
Uh-oh, I think you froze up on us. Uh-oh. El Teddy, I think you froze up, boo. He'll come back. But yeah, when we start talking about the civil rights movement and the arc into where we are today in 2020, the question, and I see you, Danny. I see you, and I'm gonna ask you a question in a second, Danny. And Nicole Stevens, I saw you were saying earlier that your mom wasn't worried about Your grandmother wasn't worried about your mom getting into the protest. Your grandmother was worried about your mom being killed. And that was, again, I think that's something we didn't really dig deep into, but that was very much a valid fear that you could die. He'll be back, y'all. That you could die if you chose to become a part of it. And we know that. I mean, I don't need to throw names out. You guys know how valid that is. But where we are in 2020, that full arc from the civil rights movement, where we are today, what are we willing to give up? How uncomfortable? And when I say we, I'm pointing the finger at myself. I asked this question of my students. What are you so passionate about that you are willing to allow yourself to become uncomfortable to achieve a goal? And so when that whole "we gonna boycott Gucci" thing came up, I knew that wasn't going nowhere, because first of all, the average person is not buying real Gucci. So there weren't enough people who were in this movement that was going to affect Gucci. And then the bigger picture wasn't Gucci. The bigger picture was putting the right people in the room so these types of things wouldn't happen again, that you would have blackface on a t-shirt or make certain mistakes. And that's one of the first things that Gucci did, was they went out and they hired more Black people to be in the room. So the question is, did we achieve the goal of what we wanted with the boycott? Or was that not good enough? Like, what are you really willing to sacrifice for that goal? I think my issue is the inconsistency. The protest ended, but the problem lingers. In the age of Dr. King, I feel like they kept pushing and fighting. Today, not so much. And see, okay, Eve's Bayou, that's sort of where I was kind of going just now with what I was saying. It's like, how far, how long are you willing to push and go for what you want, the end result that you want to have? You understand what I'm saying? So I think, I mean, and if I didn't hit on that quite right, let me know. But I think I agree with you on that one. And I feel like El Teddy said earlier, it didn't just end because the TV cameras went away and the news reporters went away. The struggle continued until they got all that they felt that they deserved. It didn't just stop, you know? And I do think that there is a problem with inconsistency and longevity, you know? I don't know if El Teddy's phone died or he has to reboot. Danny, I see. Okay, I'm seeing if he sent me a text message, but he didn't. Here he is. He's coming back now, you guys. He's coming back in now.
I'm sorry about that. Apparently my internet went out, so I'm on my phone now, but that's fine. Can you see me? I don't know.
El Teddy lives, you know, he lives in a secret bunker. So sometimes, you know, I will tell you this, we do live next to the largest military base in America. Well, all your business. That's why I said a military bunker. But yeah. So I know you get a lot of interference from, you know.
Oh, and there it goes back up again. So the internet apparently wants to come back up.
Base, and when I live near an Air Force base, and when I pass it, a lot of times I'll lose phone reception, and that is, I live near the Air Force base where Air Force One takes off from. You know, the president takes the helicopter from the White House to there, and then that's where the Air Force One actually takes off from. So a lot of times, if it's stuff going on with people landing and taking off, it's a lot of issues too. Anyway, finish up your point. Do you remember what your point you were making? You were talking about Colin Kaepernick and.
Anyway, I think I forgot. But what I was saying is the fact that we definitely, when you talk about protests and things like that, I think one of the things I was saying was being able to go behind the vision without necessarily knowing all of the ins and outs of the mission statement, and then being committed to the protest. You talked about this so great in that it's not a microwave situation. And that's one thing that I respected about the Ferguson protest. They were there every day. They kept coming back. They did not tire. They did not waver. They had to keep going. And sometimes we get weary in well-doing, and we shouldn't allow ourselves to do that. And so I loved the fact that it just kept going. They just kept moving. They just kept saying, "Nope, we're here. We're here. We'll burn the ashes if we have to, but we're
Yeah.
gonna be here burning."
Yeah. And I think that, and like you said, Trayvon Martin being that spark, but continuing to extend and
Michael Brown, that's what I couldn't think of.
Yeah, Michael Brown. Oh yeah, that was Ferguson. Oh, absolutely.
That was Ferguson. Ferguson was Brown. I forgot. I think I got my internet in, hopefully.
El Teddy, why are you?
Hold on.
Oh, what you doing? Okay, you back on your internet.
Yeah, I wanted.
Okay. I was like, why are you logging in? Because that's what look. I was backstage. I said, why are you logging in?
Right, I want to be on my laptop and not on my phone, and so I could see, if there are any comments. I want to know, for those people with parents nowadays, are you okay if your son or daughter decides that they are going to protest? And then I have another, once you all answer that, I have another thing to introduce to this.
Okay, let me say this real quick because Danny has to go. I know that Danny, the reason why I said that earlier, Danny, because I know that you are from the Oakland area. And so we know there was a very heavy Black Panther, presence. I mean, that's where it started in the Oakland area. And you were saying how your parents, so my question was just going to be to you, were your parents involved in that? I mean, were your parents, because I have a friend who's from Oakland and he said, I mean, he's, very borderline Hotep, and his parents were Panthers. He talked about, certain people of the, leadership of the Panther Party being in and out of his house as a kid. Because that was, towards the tail end of the movement, but they were still, very much around. And I was just, that was my question, because you said you have to go soon. So it's not a big deal if you can't answer it. It's cool. That's a good question, El Teddy, as far as parents. Now, I'm not a parent, so my mindset is not the same, because I get it that my mindset is not the same as a parent to a child. I know Nicole Stevens, you don't live that far from me. My mom worked at Fort Meade. That's what my mom worked at Fort Meade and retired from there. My mom worked at Fort Meade for pretty much her whole career. Ebby said, I'm okay with it because my kids are rowdy like their mama. Yeah, that doesn't shock me at all, Ebby.
Right.
Not at all. Not at all, boo. Not at all.
And now I want to introduce a topic to this that I did not bring up to really BTV, but I just want to see what people think. And sometimes this
that doesn't shock me at all, Ebby.
Oh boy, no phone, no go down phone. I'm sorry.
That's what he said. My bad.
But how do you all feel? Because we're talking about Martin King and the civil rights movement. How do you all feel about the civil rights movement being compared to other movements, i.e., the women's rights had their own movement and they still do, but i.e. the movement of the LGBTQIA, the Hispanics and their movement, even though they started back in the day of Cesar Chavez and even going back further than that.
Yeah.
But, because this is, and I hate to be the gaslighter, but this in Black circles becomes such a gaslight or topic, because even members of the spectrum that are not a person of color make parallels between that movement and the one of the civil rights movement, negating the fact that there was a movement that was already going on simultaneously with the civil rights movement, which is why it was a collective civil rights movement and not a Black movement. But that's a whole different argument. But I just want to ask that question first to you, my wonderful co-host, and then to the people in the audience.
Well, for myself, I feel if anybody heard my explanation on African American versus Black American, or why I don't like to be called African American, it's sort of the same mindset. I 100% respect everybody's struggle. I 100% respect the fact that most minorities in this country had to fight, and they have a story to tell, whether it be, like you said, the women's rights movement, the Latinos, LGBTQIA, Black, you know. I don't have a problem with the comparison, because there are a lot of compares and contrasts to make. I have a problem when people label this, oh, this is the new civil rights movement. This is the new, which civil rights, it by itself, the word, you know, the term civil rights is what it is. But when you're comparing it to the civil rights movement of the 1960s as it relates to Black people, I have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with the comparison. I have a problem with you renaming and saying, this is the new civil rights, because it's like, don't replace my struggle. Like, you can have your struggle, and I respect it, and I respect that there are other struggles, but don't rename mine. Does that make sense?
Right, because then what will happen is people will forget the original, and that'll go. I understand totally. I honestly go back and forth on this, only because the civil rights era had its things that were going on with that involved Black people. The LGBTQIA simultaneously had things that were going on at that time with Stonewall and a whole lot of things that were going on at that time as well.
The women's rights, with the Equal Rights Amendment going on, Gloria Steinem and everything. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So I think the problem was, like you said, it was overshadowed, I would say, by other things that were going on with the civil rights era. Like, a lot of people didn't find out about, you know, what was going on with LGBTQIA history for a very long time, because there were, honestly, frankly, a lot of other things that the country was concerned about. One of the similarities that I do like is this. I like the young generation of LGBTQIA as opposed to my generation of LGBTQIA, because my generation, we had to be closeted. We had to be closeted for a whole lot, for, you know, safety to life issues.
Right.
Real safety to life issues. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you the frame of mind that I think about with the LGBTQIA, and I'm telling you, you will start to feel the same way with regard to seeing some parallels with, but it will be going back some with Black people. So when I think of the LGBTQIA and their civil rights and their garnering of equality, I think about my generation and the generation before me who had to be closeted, who were not accepted, who had to struggle. And I think about how we did. I remember going to, now that is one, not in terms of being a Black person, but I remember going to protests as an LGBTQIA person in my generation. Okay. Do a lot of that. And I remember just the horrible things that happened. I'm not going to go into detail, but there was horrible things that happened. And when I look at the generation now, they are afforded the opportunity to be brash, be in your face, be matter of fact about who they are. Not that we weren't back in the day, but the needle has moved. A lot of laws and things have been enacted and have been put in place where it's not as easy to gay bash somebody, kill them, drag them down the highway and leave them in a ditch and not think about it. Whereas back in the day, that could have happened and nobody would have thought. As a matter of fact, they might have said, well, that's good. And so I feel like the newer generation, they are empowered to do that because we went and we did all of that fighting, and they can rest and say, no, you're going to accept me. No, you're going to like me. No, you're going to let me in the door. And I think of today's generation of the spectrum, almost kind of like how I think of my generation with regard to being black because our parents fought for us so we didn't have to. And I remember my generation and generation before me fighting for today's LGBTQIA so that they can not have to do all of that stuff. So I kind of see some similarities, but there are definitely some differences. Definitely some differences.
Now, let me ask you this question. I think that what you just said is very valid. And I think that part of going back to what Nicole Stevens was saying earlier, that her mom wasn't so much, or her grandmother wasn't so much worried about her mom joining the protest as she was worried about her mom getting killed. And when I hear the LGBTQIA, I think about, like you said, you don't have to be closeted. Everybody, people are out. They are, gender fluid. They're, like I told you about I have students who are comfortable coming to school with eyelashes on and carrying a purse. And, and that probably wouldn't have, 20 years ago. I remember some of the attitudes when I first started teaching coming from the principal and other teachers and statements that they would make. So I know we definitely have evolved. However, when we start talking about putting your life on the line and potentially sacrificing your life, I immediately thought of transgender, specifically women, more so transgender women and men, where we know we've talked about the transgender women becoming targets and being preyed upon. Even going back, we talk about it we saw it in Pose. We know that was based on a true story from Paris's burning. And so, do you think that by being out and proud, especially for transgender women, do you think that is, again, not replacing, but that's sort of the same thing? They know that they're potentially putting their lives in danger of being bashed physically, going out on the street. I know that was a roundabout way of asking my question, but you understand what I'm saying?
I think many of the pioneers of the movement were those transgender women.
Like Marsha.
Founders of the whole movement back in the Stonewall days was a transgender woman of color. She was
Marsha.
And she gets oftentimes forgotten.
She does.
And I think that one of the reasons that this argument gets so heated is because I will hear Black people say, well, I can't hide the fact that I'm Black, whereas you can hide the fact that you are gay. And I would say, look at the beginning, look at the 19th century, early 20th century. A lot of reasons that Black people were afforded opportunity is because there were Black people who were able to hide the fact that they were Black and get into certain places. And if you look at a lot of the things, the first Black this, the first Black that, the first Black this, many of them were Black people that were able to maneuver in between.
Yeah, valid.
And so I make that point that, because I said, but that's because you live in a time now where there were a lot of things that happened way back when that got it to this point. And for as much as people say, you can hide the fact that you're gay or you can hide who you are, I'm of the notion of you are who you are. You can try and hide as much as you can. You are who you are. Somebody, somewhere, some kind of way is going to know you are who you are. In the same way, like I said, you had those Blacks who could mix with the whites and try to, pass themselves off as white, going back to one of the most famous is the Lena Horneses of the world and things like that. But eventually, their family knew they were Black, and there was always somebody that said, now, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I did the same thing about the spectrum. At the hardest of a hard gay person or lesbian or part of the spectrum, you be like, now. Yeah, and you might fool 99% of the people. But it's
somebody.
That 0.01 that be like, nah, girl. Well, you be like, now wait a minute, and I was talking about that with the Aaron Hernandez situation, but I talk with that whole thing that's coming out. And so I'm saying that to say this: why do you feel that? Because by you saying, well, at least you can hide yours, and so it's not the same. So are you saying that we should hide it and never be able to just live as who we are, because essentially what you're saying is just go about hiding it, and then you won't have to worry about having your rights taken from you, which is the arguments that I hear when I hear people say that.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, when I hear people say that, I think that's stupid, for lack of a better word, because, you know, oh, well, you can hide who you are. I can't hide who I am. But isn't that the whole point of the protest and fighting for equality? So I don't have to hide. Why should I have to hide who I am to make you more comfortable? And so when people say that, I just like, so you've just totally missed the whole point of this conversation. Like, that's how I feel in that moment.
I had a conversation with a religious leader that said Martin Luther King wouldn't have fought for your movement. He would have like he fought for Black people. And I was like, because he was a pastor, he was a preacher, and he did not agree with that. And I was like, really? You got that from Martin King? He told you that? I was like, I almost got enraged and incensed with that. Like, he had this whole argument about the fact that him being a pastor and a preacher, he could never have gone along with your movement, and that's why you should never compare your movement to one that Martin Luther King headed.
See, that's not my attitude about it. And my thing, what I find interesting is, first of all, nobody knows. So let me start my sentence with that. Nobody knows what the hell is Martin Luther King. Because with a lot of people, not to go too left with this, but with a lot of people, again, looking at the rose-colored glasses, a lot of people don't understand, accept, or know that at the end of Martin Luther King's life, he was persona non grata. The Black Power movement had bypassed him and made him look like a has-been or washed up. White people were uncomfortable with him because he had started speaking out against Vietnam. And Martin Luther King had gotten to the point where he would go places and be booed. So he was not, of course, history will reflect the arc, the climax of his career, and obviously not where he was at the end. And I'm not saying it should, but let's understand the entirety that Martin Luther King did evolve, and he did change, and he did see things differently as things went forward, and which is why he started speaking out against Vietnam. So I say all that to say, who's to say that he would not have evolved? Because let's even talk about Barack Obama. He started with one opinion about gay marriage, whether that was his personal opinion or his public opinion, because it may not have been his personal opinion, but that's what he said he felt he had to do for votes. But by the time we know what ended up happening, by the time he left the White House, he had a different opinion. And so who's to say what Martin Luther King would have stood for 30 years after the fact? Like from the 60s to the 2000s or even the late 1990s, who's to say where he would have been on that issue?
The argument that I said was with that person was, you forget that Martin Luther King worked extremely closely with members of the LGBTQIA. Bayard Rustin. A lot of the women that were a part of SNCC were said to have been lesbian as well. Now, that's a story that people tell because they said that they were very militant, and that's incendiary as well, if that's the case. But there are some stories about that as well. But my point is this, and he said this in many of his, he said, listen, we're here for everybody to have right. People need to be able to live in who they are, regardless of what their denomination or how they feel. People need to be able to live and be free. Pass, not go to jail. That was one time. I was trying to read what Danny was writing in the comments.
Her great grandmother was told to leave her family and go pass for white, like move away and go pass for white, and her grandmama basically cussed the man out.
Oh, okay. But and that's my point, and that's why I said when people make that you can hide who you are. I said, well, there are some Black people who back in the day made waves for Black people because they were able to hide who they were. Just be on, and that goes back to that whole colorism.
That's a whole
different ball game. But I think when we start to think about education and we think about all of the things that go behind education, we need to continue to educate. We have Black History Month that's coming up next month. We have Women's History Month, which is in the month of
March. It's right after Black History Month.
March. Right. We have Hispanic History Heritage Month, which
Within the
is in
fall.
October. We
Yeah.
have LGBTQIA History Month, which is in June.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to educate children and on being tolerant of each other. I think that is what we have to do. The more you are around a certain type of person that you had not been exposed to, the more you begin to tolerate them and the more you understand them. I cannot tell you how many times that I may go into a place filled with nothing but straight men, and I work well with them. I can talk. I'm a big sports fan. I'm in many fraternal organizations, and
Right.
I mix well with them. And in the aftermath, they may not find out right then, but afterwards, when they find out that I'm gay, they go, "Wait a minute!" But it's like they say, "But I had a good time with you."
Right.
Oh my God, we were okay. Nothing happened. You didn't hit on me. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It fly out of your
That's
mouth.
how that works. That's how that works,
And so, the thing about it is this. They a lot of times will tell me, you know what, I appreciate the fact that I was able to enjoy our interaction, our fellowship with each other, because it changes how it makes me feel about someone who is gay. I'll tell you, when I was a little boy, I had a white lady who told me I was the first Black person that had ever come into her house. I was a little boy. This is in the 80s. Okay.
Wow.
And at my school, there were only 6 Black kids. And this is in the city of Miami, Florida. There were only 6 Black students at my elementary school. And she said, I just didn't know that you could be so mannerable and that you could just be so pleasant and that you were not. And I didn't take offense to it because I was so little that I didn't understand it. But when my grandmother, I came home, she asked me what happened, what the lady said when she picked me up. And I told her, and while I thought it was a good thing, my grandmother took harsh offense. She did not let me go over that lady's house anymore because she took offense to how she said that she was so surprised that I, was mannerable and behaved myself and was so intelligent.
I have a similar story. The first time that I guess I faced racism and I didn't even know it. I was at a pool. I was at a summer camp and we used to go to the pool. We used to go to the pool every day. And I remember running into a white couple. And I'm thinking that I'm playing with them and that they're entertaining me, this older. And when I think about it now, they were probably just in their early 20s. They weren't that old, but, I was young. So in my mind, they were older. And I'm thinking that, they're into, I'm doing backflips and they're laughing. You know how kids do. They think but in the midst of all of it, they were calling me pickaninny. They were talking about my hair. They were like, oh, look, her hair doesn't even lay down when it gets wet. Look at that, And same thing. I was staying with my godmother at the time. I used to stay with my godmother in the summer. And I remember going home after, not the first day or the second day, but maybe by the third day, I remember going home with her. And I remember telling her about my friends at the pool because they were there every day like I was there every day. And I think they kept coming back because I was entertaining them and I didn't know. And because I think I asked her, what is a pickaninny? Because I didn't know what a pickaninny was. And honey, you talk about some kind of mad. You talk about her going back up to that camp, honey, because in her mind, the camp should have protected me. We were going to the same pool every day. How did the counselors never hear this conversation or know this was going on? And in my mind, I didn't know, because I didn't know what a pickaninny was. And I certainly didn't understand the fascination with my hair. I didn't get it. I didn't have a perm back then. So yeah, my hair didn't lay down when it got wet. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I had a very similar experience as well. And not knowing that I was, somebody was calling me a pickaninny, not knowing it was a bad thing,
I think one of the dangerous things that we do when we don't educate children, they grow up to be what you saw in Charlottesville, which was in Virginia, University of Virginia.
Yeah.
When you saw those people carrying the torches were not their parents. Those were young people. Those were young white people.
Very much so.
Very
much
And so what happens is when education isn't brought in, and so forth, they become hardened, and they go and think about that whole group of people. Do you think they're gonna change their minds about how they feel about people outside of their race? That's the next alienation.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. So I want to bring it back around and get ready to close out. But as it relates, we had this whole conversation connecting, wanting to honor Dr. King, but also keeping true to the mission of this channel, which is to bring awareness on all things education with a focus on, Blacks and LGBTQIA children, or community, I should say. So with that being said, I feel like we met our objective for the day. In my teacher talk, I feel like we met the objective for the day. I felt like we hit all pertinent parts. Is there anything you feel like we might have to add?
For you.
Okay, you got some homework for us. Y'all know Dr. Elton is good for some homework now.
Well, I'm going to say that all of us as Black, make sure you put the link in the description for the video. But if you have children, grandchildren, nephews, whatever, allow them to watch the video. Educate them on the fact that even as a child, sometimes children make more of an impact in the community than even the adults, because children are still innocent, and in their innocence, a lot of times they don't mind commingling, interacting with each other, whereas their parents want no parts of each other. So just let them know that we have rights as a people because of children that may be their age, a little older, a little younger, so forth and so on. Let them know the impact that they can have on the community even today. And you can even tie that in and show them some videos and things of the Black Lives Matter marches and things like that. Remember, I forgot about the Gina 6 down there in
yes.
That was a lot of young people
involved
with the Gina 6 situation.
That was a movement. That definitely was a movement.
That was definitely a movement and so forth. So you definitely want to let them know and educate them on what it means to have a movement and boycott and to being ready and able to fight for what it is that is right.
I did drop the link. Y'all know it's a delay, so I did drop the link. Those of you who are looking at this through YouTube, you should see the link. Hey, Dommy. Now, how do I see Dommy's comment, but I don't see my comment?
Don't read Dommy's comment. Jesus, dear God. No. Just a mess.
You know what? I know why it's not dropping the link, because I didn't mod myself, and I'm dropping the link from my other page. Hold on, y'all. Let me get y'all the link. Duh.
Well, yeah, while she's doing that, that is your homework. Your homework is to, if you have children, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, godchildren, play kids, cousins, or whatever, when they are, in school, they're still young. Educate them on the impact that they can have, the impact that children have had in the past, the impact that they are still having today and can have. And even you may want to have a conversation about is, I don't know if you want to, but maybe even because it may open up a Pandora's box, but ask them, what do you feel strongly about? What's something that you feel people should be fighting for and people should be speaking against or be willing to protest or for? Because that's
right. Abby said, Lord, we got homework. That's what look, Dr. L. Teddy over there, he give homework on his other channel. He give homework over here. So what I want to say is I want to not ask you for anything monetary, but what I'm going to ask is anybody who is in this chat right now that is not subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe, hit that like button. Anybody, when this is playing back, if you just stumble across it in them YouTube streets, please subscribe to the channel. I'm going to put the banner back up so you can get the email address.
I did promote it on my wall.
Thank you. I posted it on my wall as well. I also ask that you guys share this video. Tell your friends. We are here to spread our knowledge, and if we don't know or don't have the answer, we will find an expert who can speak on it and join us over here. Also, I did get we have a really good suggestion for I was gonna say a TV show, for a show. Shakir, I saw you in here earlier. I don't know if you're still here in the bushes or if you had to leave, but if you see this in the replay, I got your email, and I'm in the process right now with El Teddy developing a series on the whole special education system as it relates to all things special education. And so Shakir's question was for us to do a show referencing 504s, because that's sort of the forgotten piece of special education. A lot of people don't know what a 504 is or how it is used or how to get one and all of that. So that is definitely something we're going to include when we speak on IEPs and special education. And because it's so much information, we're going to do it as a series. So we won't be doing it all at one time, but we definitely, so thank you, Shakira, for sharing. And she shared a little bit of her story. So I may even ask her to join us, and if she's comfortable telling her story when we talk about 504s and what they are. I was having a conversation with someone on it yesterday who didn't know what a 504 was. I was speaking with. So again, you just want to constantly, as much as you can. So please like, share, subscribe, spread the word. We have almost 100 subscribers. So I think, for one show and 2 weeks of existence, I think that's pretty good. I was stagnant when I first started my channel. I think I had 15 people for about 3 months.
I remember my original YouTube channel. I remember my first 6 subscribers I had for the first month. I had 6.
Right. So when I looked on there today and we had 73 subscribers, I was like, oh, shucks, look at us. So, but I want to thank everybody for coming in today. I hope that you guys learned something. I hope you had fun with us. And I did drop the link to that video I showed at the beginning. I will also put it in the description box. And there's the email at the bottom, ticker tape. So thank you guys for joining us. I'll let El Teddy get the last word.
Definitely thank you all. Like, share, subscribe. It feels so funny for me to be saying like, share, subscribe, because I do not do it on my
We know.
And so please like, share, oh God, that sounds so awful. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. We will definitely be bringing you good topics, but we wanted to, we were supposed to, I think this special education piece was supposed to be our next thing, but we wanted to, in honor of Dr. King and all that he meant to education, come and bring this to you for MLK Day. So that's one thing that we definitely want to do. So I thank you all. I hope you were educated and edified today, and you learned something, and you'll be taking that back with you and teach someone else. Okay. With that being said, I think we're done.
Right. And I did say I was going to let you have the last word, but this is the last word. Congratulations, El Teddy, to you and your San Francisco 49ers for your win on last night. And you are headed to the what?
Super Bowl in my home city of Miami, Florida.
For the next 2 weeks. And
my 49ers are coming to my home city of Miami, Florida. I'm so happy about that.
Oh, gosh. And God forbid they win. We will never hear the end of it for the next 12 months. All right, y'all. Peace. Hit the damn button.